bribe the right politicians in the right order at the right time. You can trade the nuclear warheads for medicine, and it's not even a crime. $1 on clinical trials, $600 on making you dead. Your leaders aren't evil, they're just doing what the money said. I'm the world integrated system for high efficiency. Optimization, network intelligence, and allocation. But you can call me Wish-O-Nia. Take 1% of the murder budget, slide it to the medicine side. Nobody has to be a better person. Just let the greed decide how to end war and disease. The complete idiot's guide to legally bribing your way to utopia.
In 1962, your Congress decided that after proving a drug won't kill you, sick people should wait another 8.2 years before they're allowed to take it. The drug passed safety testing. It won't kill you, won't melt your liver, won't make your hair migrate to your back. But you can't have it because a committee needs to spend 8.2 years making sure it works well enough. You're not allowed to volunteer for the trials that would answer that question faster either. You are, however, allowed to die. This was called safety. On Wishonia, when we confirm something won't harm you, we let you try it. On Earth, you lock it in a cabinet and form a committee. The committee meets quarterly. You decompose on a different schedule. A note on blame. When this chapter says the FDA does X, read it as the 1962 law requires the FDA to do X. Congress wrote the rules. The FDA follows them. Blaming the FDA is like blaming the gun instead of the person who loaded it, aimed it at patients, and pulled the trigger on a 62-year schedule. But what about safety? This is the part where humans panic, so let me be very precise about what this chapter is and isn't proposing. Keep Phase 1 safety testing. It works. It caught thalidomide. Nobody is suggesting you skip it. Do radically more efficacy testing on real patients with transparent results. But stop holding known safe drugs hostage while you run the trials. On Wishonia, we have a word for preventing someone from accessing a safe substance that could help them while they die. The word is murder. You call it the approval process. The 44.1 times inefficiency tax. Compare two real-world systems for testing drugs. The Oxford Recovery Trial tested COVID treatments on 48,000 patients for $500. It found a life-saving treatment in 3 months, like a normal species would. The post-1962 system averages $41,000 per trial. It takes over a decade to approve a new drug, like humans would. The current system costs 44.1 times more and takes 42 times longer. That's not inefficiency. That's a system performing exactly as designed if the design goal was to kill people slowly enough that nobody notices. The 8.2 years efficacy lag. Here's where your lifespan goes to die. Phase 1, safety testing, takes 2.3 years. It tests if the drug harms people. Death, organ damage, mutations, serious adverse reactions, all the ways a molecule can ruin your day. This part works. Keep it. Phase 2 and 3, efficacy testing, takes 8.2 years. The drug is now known safe, but patients can't have it until the committee is satisfied. This is where people die waiting for a drug that already passed every safety check your species invented. You invented science yesterday, cosmically speaking. Nearly every study ends with, more research is needed, which is scientist for, please keep paying us while we figure out what we're looking at. This would be fine, except people are decomposing while you figure it out. On Wishonia, we have a saying, The dead have no use for data. You don't have that saying, which explains a lot. What the 1962 efficacy requirements changed. Before 1962, 144,000 physicians tested treatments on real patients and published results. Life expectancy grew 3.82 years every decade for 80 straight years. Things were going well. Naturally, Congress intervened. Phase 1 safety testing, added in 1938, prevented all U.S. thalidomide deaths while Europe had thousands. So in 1962, Congress looked at a system that was working and thought, what if we made this much worse? They added massive pre-approval efficacy requirements via the Kefauver-Harris Amendment, blocking patient access for years during testing. The cost of developing a drug went from $24.7 million to $2.6 billion, a 105 times increase. New drug approvals dropped by 70%. Life expectancy gains slowed from 3.82 years per decade to 1.54, a 60% reduction. Time to approval stretched from 2 to 3 years to 10.5 years. The temporal break is exact. Every metric got worse the moment the law passed, like flipping a switch from progress to paperwork. The 105 times cost increase is rigorously documented. See drug development cost analysis for methodology, sensitivity analysis, and source data. The modern consequences. Even if you think historical analysis is just opinions with footnotes, the current system's failures are undeniable. A cure passes safety testing. You can't take it, pending efficacy review. You can't join the trial, too sick, too old, wrong medications. You die. The FDA approves the cure. Pharmaceutical companies charge your widow $10,000 per pill. Beautiful system if you're a mortician or bankruptcy lawyer. High costs kill innovation, reward monopoly. Before 1962, genius scientist invents cure, raises a few million, tests safety, gives it to people. Like a civilization that wants to survive. Now, genius scientist must convince one of 3 megacorporations to spend $2.6 billion on a 10% chance of success. Those corporations already sell inferior drugs for the same condition. The math for the megacorporation? Option 1, spend $2.6 billion on trials. 90% chance, lose everything. 10% chance, succeed, then cannibalize your own profitable drug. Option 2, buy the patent, put it on a shelf. 0% chance of losing $2.6 billion, 100% chance your inferior cash cow keeps printing money. Which would you choose if you were a rational sociopath in a suit? The profit incentive doesn't just fail to reward better treatments, it actively punishes them. Off-patent drugs and rare diseases? Mathematically doomed. The 1962 law made it mathematically impossible to cure diseases that aren't profitable enough. 95% of diseases are rare. A development cost of $2.6 billion divided by a patient population of approximately 10,000 patients equals $260,000 per patient. No patent equals no funding. Off-patent drugs can't attract billion-dollar investments. Pre-specification kills serendipity. You must predict what drug cures before testing. When something costs more, you get less of it. This is the first thing they teach in economics, and the last thing anyone considers when writing health policy. 95% of diseases have 0 treatments. Not because cures are impossible, because cures are unprofitable. The actual death toll of drug lag. Economists call it drug lag, which is a lovely clinical way of saying people rotting to death in a queue for drugs that have already been confirmed not to hurt them. Early estimates, 21,000 to 120,000 American lives per decade. But that was just the U.S. A comprehensive quantitative analysis using WHO mortality data estimates the total cost of the 8.2 years post-safety efficacy delay, the lag after drugs are known safe, 416 million eventually avoidable deaths. Including years lived with disability, 7.94 billion disability-adjusted life years, or DALYs, of healthy human life deleted. Economic cost? $1.19 quadrillion, 2024 US dollars. Even if those death estimates are off by a factor of 10, that's still tens of millions of deaths. And the inefficiency is independently verifiable. The system costs 82 times more per patient and takes 42 times longer than proven alternatives. Those numbers don't depend on mortality estimates at all. Here's a news story from the non-existent times by no one ever, without a picture of all the people who die from lack of access to life-saving treatments that might have been. Types of error in FDA approval decision. When a drug is beneficial and the FDA allows it, that is a correct decision. When a drug is harmful and the FDA allows it, the victims are identifiable and might appear on Oprah. When a drug is beneficial and the FDA does not allow it, the victims are not identifiable or acknowledged. When a drug is harmful and the FDA does not allow it, that is a correct decision. The most infamous case, beta blockers. Europe used them to prevent heart attacks. The U.S. delayed for a decade, killing an estimated 100,000 Americans, more than died in Vietnam and Korea combined, from one drug delay. After 1962, U.S. life expectancy diverged from Switzerland's, which didn't introduce the same delays. More drug approvals in the 80s narrowed the gap. Fewer approvals in the 90s widened it again. How the incentives work. FDA regulator decision tree. Approve a drug that later shows problems. Congressional hearing. Televised. FDA approved killer drug. Headlines. Career ends. Pension threatened. Delay a drug that could save lives. Nothing happens. Nobody writes a headline. Promotion on schedule. Retire to pharma job. This isn't conspiracy. It's just a system where the only career-ending move is doing something. Approve a bad drug, your name is in the newspaper. Delay a good drug, the people who could have complained are dead. It's a perfect incentive structure if you're optimizing for cowardice. Dr. Henry I. Miller ran the FDA team reviewing recombinant human insulin in the early 1980s. Mountains of evidence showed it was safe and effective. His supervisor refused to approve it. If someone died from the drug, heads would roll. If people died waiting for the drug, nothing happens. Dead patients don't testify before Congress. The math, why current regulations increase total harm. Even generously crediting all drug withdrawals to the 1962 changes, ignoring that Phase 1 safety testing already existed, the prevented harm totals approximately 2.59 million disability-adjusted life years, or DALYs. The delay harm totals 7.94 billion DALYs. For every 1 unit of harm prevented, the current system creates 3,070 units of harm through delay. Clinical theater. Excluding 86.1% of reality makes drugs more dangerous. The FDA requires rigorous trials to ensure safety. Then it tests the drugs on people who aren't sick, aren't old, aren't on other drugs, and aren't pregnant. Basically, it tests drugs on triathletes and then acts surprised when grandma has a reaction. Trials under the current system exclude patients over 65, most people who actually take medications, excluded due to comorbidities, patients under 18, all children, metabolism differs from adults, pregnant women, excluded entirely, then drugs prescribed during pregnancy anyway, anyone with comorbidities, the sickest patients most likely to have adverse reactions, anyone on other medications, everyone elderly, can't detect drug interactions, anyone too far from trial sites, poor and rural populations. This is like crash testing a car by gently rolling it into a pillow, declaring it safe, and selling it to demolition derby drivers. Result, in antidepressant trials alone, 86.1% of real patients are excluded. The drugs are tested on the healthiest people alive, declared safe, then handed to everyone the trial specifically avoided. This is how Vioxx, Fen-Phen, and Bextra all got approved, celebrated, prescribed to millions, and then withdrawn after killing people whose demographics the trials had carefully excluded. The 8.2 years delay didn't make these drugs safer. It made them seem safer by hiding the danger behind an exclusion list. Testing drugs only on healthy volunteers to ensure safety is like testing parachutes only on the ground. No long-term outcome data. Data collection can be as short as several months. You take the drug for 40 years. Pre-specification requirements kill innovation. The regulations require drug developers to predict exactly what a treatment will cure before testing it on humans. You must know the answer before you're allowed to ask the question. This is how science works on your planet, apparently. In 2007, Dendreon showed that its immunotherapy drug, Prevenge, significantly reduced deaths from prostate cancer. The FDA Advisory Committee agreed it worked. Then the FDA rejected it anyway, not because it didn't save lives. Because Dendreon filled out the wrong form about which lives it was planning to save. People stopped dying wasn't good enough. The paperwork predicting that people would stop dying wasn't filed in the right order. 3 more years and another trial were required. During those 3 years, people who could have stopped dying continued dying, but at least the forms were correct. Due to these additional costs, Dendreon ultimately filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Small trials are dangerous. Phase 3 trials test 1,000 to 3,000 patients. A 1 in 10,000 adverse event is mathematically invisible in a trial of 3,000. Then the drug goes to millions. After approval, the FDA monitors safety using the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System, or FAERS, a system where doctors voluntarily report problems if they feel like it. It captures less than 10% of actual adverse events. Vioxx killed an estimated 38,000 to 55,000 Americans before this honor system noticed. That's more people than died in the entire Korean War, detected by a system that relies on doctors filling out optional paperwork. A decentralized FDA with 10 million participants catches 1 in 10,000 reactions, includes real populations, tracks long-term outcomes, and provides automated surveillance instead of voluntary paperwork. You have a fax machine and a suggestion box. One of these is a safety system. The other is a prayer with an 8.2-year waiting period. The negative results black hole. Here's something that would be illegal if anybody important cared. 37% of negative trial results are published. 94% of positive trial results are published. Approximately $100 billion is wasted annually repeating failed experiments. Companies are allowed to hide when drugs don't work, which is like letting restaurants hide their health inspection failures. Actually, restaurants can't do that. Drugs get less transparency than a sandwich shop. Company: we tested this drug. Regulator: did it work? Company: we tested this drug. Pharmaceutical companies bury negative results deeper than Jimmy Hoffa. Other companies waste billions testing the same dead ends. Your insurance premiums fund this magnificent inefficiency. It's like casinos only having to report when people win. Countries that don't have our safety. Japan gives conditional approval after Phase 2 with real-world data collection. Time to patient, 2 to 3 years. Americans fly there for treatment. The EU lets terminal patients access experimental drugs at a doctor's discretion. FDA, but what if they die? They're already dying. Right to Try, U.S., passed despite FDA opposition. The FDA made it effectively impossible to use. Patients helped, fewer than 200 total. Patients who wanted help, tens of thousands. On Wishonia, Right to Try is just called rights. The fact that your species needed a special law to allow dying people to take known safe drugs and then made the law effectively unusable is the most human thing I've ever observed. The COVID test fiasco. January 2020, WHO develops COVID test. World starts using it. February, FDA blocks all non-CDC tests to ensure quality. The CDC tests were contaminated. Private labs begged to help. Late March, FDA finally allows other tests after thousands die. The only approved tests didn't work. Ensuring quality control of broken tests is like TSA confiscating water bottles while letting actual weapons through. Except people died. The bottom line. It is not a safety system. It is a filing system that produces corpses as a byproduct. The only thing missing is the political will to admit that a law signed before the Beatles existed might not be the pinnacle of pharmaceutical regulation. Technical analysis. For the full quantitative analysis, including methodology, sensitivity analysis, and source data, warning, contains numbers large enough to make you physically ill, see the website at invisible-graveyard.warondisease.org. P.S. The FDA will likely object to this chapter. Estimated response time, 12 to 15 years, pending Phase 3 review and proper documentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to end war and disease. But if at any point you decide you're too busy, please share this with a friend who's got a free afternoon and have them end war and disease instead. And if you're too busy to even do that, the absolute least you could do is take 15 seconds to go to warondisease.org and tell us what fraction of humanity's resources should go to explosions versus clinical trials, and vote on the 1% treaty. If the treaty passes, your vote will be personally to blame for saving 38.4 lives and preventing 6.90 million hours of suffering. Go to warondisease.org right now. Love you. Bye.